Assuming we started, I missed a little pop-up, but that's okay. Well, hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Critical Hit, using Dungeons & Dragons to gamify training and evaluation. My name is George Berksham, and I am the Southwest Regional Coordinator for the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be the host and question moderator today. Our presenter this morning is Evan Barber, an IT Technical Associate for the Brookins Library at the University of Illinois, Springfield, where he supervises a small team of student employees. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. First, if you would like to register for other webinars or trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. The session is 1 hour, so you'll get 1 LEU. If you are watching the archived recording of this webinar, the instructions on how to obtain your LEU are available in the video's description on YouTube. Or you can also find those instructions on the Indiana State Library's continuing education website. So without further ado, I'll turn the presentation over to Evan.
Thank you so much for that introduction, George. Thank you everybody for having me today. So today I'll be talking about Dungeons & Dragons. For those of you who are new, don't worry too much if you don't know what Dungeons & Dragons is or you're not familiar with it. I will be giving a baseline for that. So as he said, my name is Evan. I'm at the University of Illinois Springfield. I'm glad to be joining you today. We'll start with an agenda and I'll talk about what Dungeons & Dragons is for newbies out there. Talk about what our training and evaluation program was before and after Dungeons & Dragons, what the process is like for creating encounters and what's changed since we've launched it. We'll play some live D&D for all you nerds out there, and we'll end with a bit of Q&A at the end. A little bit of dungeon keeping before we go too far into things. So who is this for? This is for anybody who has an interest in training, evaluation, stuff like that. If you have a lot of social capital, you can maybe talk to your supervisor and ask that they can start this kind of thing with you. Don't worry too much about taking notes or screenshotting things as I go, because slides and materials will be available online after the presentation. I'll post a link in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can either save them to the very end, or you can ask those in the chat as we go along if it's going to be something that's going to leave you confused as we progress through the session. All right. So I want to start with a bit of definitions. So this is the definition that comes straight from Dungeons & Dragons. And it says the core of D&D is storytelling. You and your friends tell a story together, guiding your heroes through quest for treasure, battles with deadly foes, daring rescues, courtly intrigue, and much more. I've modified this definition to kind of fit how I do things at my institution. So the core of D&D is storytelling. You and your team tell a story together, guiding your heroes through quest for experience, battles with troublesome problems, daring fixes, and much more. There's some similarities between these two definitions. They both start with that the core of D&D is storytelling, because I think that's an important part of this method is coming together as a team, as a group, and going through this journey together. So I'm going to define a few terms for the newbies out there to make sure that we're all on the same page. So encounter, adventure, quest are all interchangeable ones that are words for contained scenario that are wrapped up within 1 or 2 sessions. A campaign is a collection of those encounters, adventures, or quests, usually involving the same players. The dungeon master is the person that runs the campaign, like a supervisor or manager. It's often abbreviated as DM. And then the adventurer player are the participants taking part in that encounter or campaign. All right. So before Dungeons & Dragons, for my student employees, the onboarding was often like, here's your desk, here's your microwave, good luck. That's probably a lot of, it's relatable for a lot of us here, because definitely when I started, I had no prior training, there was no documentation. So that's something I wanted to improve for my student employees that are coming on, often for them, this being their first job. It was a majority of on-the-job learning too, which isn't really great because you're kind of feel like you're in the deep part of the pool before you've learned how to swim. And there's no official review process for students. So some of you, based on the poll that you filled out, Most of you said that you were neither agreed or disagreed with you have a strong training program. About 22% said you somewhat disagree that you have a strong training program. And most of you, 40%, said meh for annual reviews are easy. And I definitely agree with that, but we'll talk about how Dungeons and Dragons really helps with that. So this is what it looked like before, but now that we have Dungeons and Dragons for my student team, it looks more like this. So we have scaffolded learning, we have team building, and we have physical character sheets. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the term scaffolded learning, that just means it's a learning that builds on top of learning. So to know your alphabets, to know X, Y, Z's at the end, you have to know A, B, C, and everything in between. So it's information that builds on top of information. It's a really great team building exercise because you're playing together as a group. So you get to, form those bonds with your fellow players, your coworkers, as you go through these, safe space encounters, as you're fixing problems or you're solving difficult situations. And that physical character sheet is really helpful because you get this tangible piece of information at the end of, for me, it's semesters or years with my team, and I can see all the adventures they went on, things that they've learned, and how their numbers have gone up throughout their time in my department. All right, so here's a comparison of character sheets. The one on the left is the official one from Dungeons and Dragons. You can see there are a lot of boxes, and it's got a bunch of, adventure-y kind of things like armor class, intuition, wisdom, stuff like that. And on the right-hand side is my version of D&D, which is data and devices, since I'm an IT person. It's a bit more streamlined. Still, the main things are there. So I'll go ahead and just focus on this one and zoom in. So you can see it starts with player name, class, level, alignment, experience points. Then we have starting skills, ideas, initiative, speed, successes and failures, goals. The bottom right-hand corner is where the badges go, which are the stickers that they get after encounters. And then you can see the skill tree over here with some main categories, followed by sub categories, which is where they actually earn the points and where you'll earn points today as we play along. We'll dive a bit more into this, but I want to move on to something else before we come back. So this is an overview of what an encounter looks like when we're playing D&D. So the DM, which would be me, gives a starting prompt. So for example, a user calls in while you're working. Player with the highest dice roll goes first, but this can also be random choice by the supervisor. The player takes a turn. So for example, they could say, "Thank you for calling Library Systems. How can I help you?" The encounter continues clockwise until resolved. And then once it's done, everybody updates their character sheet with the points that they've earned and a little badge. The most important part of this whole process is that middle area in the center. So players take an action. The really nice part about being in these encounters, which are totally controlled, within your team, is that you can immediately correct actions that your player takes. So for example, in this encounter, if they would have answered the phone like, "What do you want?" you can immediately pause the game and give that instantaneous feedback like, "That might be fine for answering your phone, but in a work environment, you might want to answer it this way." And you can try it again. So they can say, "Thank you for calling. How can I help you?" And you can be like, "That was much better. But how about you also include where they're calling?" Because they can maybe misdialed and they're trying to call the sandwich shop down the street. So there's that nice bit of instantaneous feedback in this kind of safe environment where they're allowed to make mistakes, but it's not out there in the public area. If they're on the front desk and they say something that they shouldn't have or they told incorrect information, you can immediately correct that here in this controlled environment. So here's what it looks like from the player side. So the player is given a prompt. Player one may ask clarifying questions to the DM. So if they didn't quite understand the starting prompt for the encounter, they can ask questions. So they can ask if anybody is around that they can ask in this, virtual, mythical environments. The player may talk to other people at the table to confirm an answer. They can be like, "What do you think, Jesse? Should I go with this or should I do this?" And then once they've decided, they can take that action. They can tell the DM what they want to do. And it continues around until everybody's had a chance to go and the problem's resolved. And then at the end, they update their character sheet. So I've talked a bit about encounters, and your question is probably, what is an encounter and how do you make an encounter? And that'll be a bit more clear when we go to this slide, which kind of looks like a crime board that you see in a TV show. It's just a whiteboard with a bunch of post-it notes. And this is how I build my encounters as I play Dungeons and Dragons, as I get ready to have these encounters built out for my team. So I actually start at the end with what I want my learning outcomes to be as we play. So let me look over here. Let me get my little laser pointer out. Here's the end, here's the start. And I put those learning outcomes at the very last part, because that's what I want to make sure that they learn. And then I go back to the front and I have an idea of what I want them to start with. So what's the starting prompts for them? So here would be students learn how to use a phone properly, answer it properly. But my starting prompt is the phone rings. And then it progresses along. You can see little branches off. And these are me thinking of possible scenarios that these encounters can go towards. You won't think of everything, but it's helpful, for planning to think of most of the things that are going to happen, some questions that are going to come up. So if a student has questions, they might branch off here and they might do a little bit of research on the other side and come back into this main path, and they're back on track. There is a fair bit of improvisation when you're doing Dungeons and Dragons. There is this little post note over here, and this is where they need to know stuff beforehand. So this is something that's important. You don't want them to learn, X, Y, Z if they haven't learned ABC yet. You want to make sure that they have all the tools available for them before they start this encounter. The way this often materializes for me is I'll drop hints to my students when we're getting ready to do an encounter. So I'll be like, hey, have you read the student manual lately? And they'll be like, no. And I was like, it might be worthwhile to read that manual. So once they come into the setting, they're like, oh, this is why I had to read that manual last week, because we're being quizzed on something about it in this encounter. So what's changed since we've started doing Dungeons and Dragons? And I'd say a lot. Since George saw this at the Library Collective last year, the character sheet has went through many iterations. It's much different than he saw it. So it's still being updated and we're still learning from it. I've learned that's really helpful to actually play a real D&D campaign with your team. I'm dealing with student employees who aren't often familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, although that started to turn around with Stranger Things, bringing it back into fashion. So I usually reach out to one of our librarians in our library, John, who was my dungeon master when I started. And he puts on a really great campaign for about 2 hours. And it's fun seeing students in those kind of real fantasy environments, and they kind of get a better grasp on how this is supposed to go. And recently, another change is that it's now connected to our project management system, which we use ClickUp for. So as part of that, when they put new tasks on their board, they fill out a section where it's linked to either goals on their sheets or some skills that they'll learn as part of completing this task. So once they complete that task, they can update their sheet as well. So now it's in that virtual environment, which is a change for the good because of the pandemic. All right. So now we're going to get ready to play Dungeons and Dragons. So the first part of playing Dungeons and Dragons, though, is filling out your character sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and paste again in chat your character sheets. So if you haven't downloaded it, go ahead and download it. You can either fill out an Adobe Acrobat, or you can open it in Chrome or Firefox and fill it out there. We'll just be filling out these little top sections up here. Let me zoom in. So you'll put in your player name. You'll put in your level, which is the years you've been at your institution, years you've been in your role, your alignment. So this is what you do. So for me, since I'm a tech person, I put hardware and software. Some of you might want to write circulation or cataloging, whatever you do. And then fill out this box here that's called starting skills. If you have any questions while you're doing that, please put them in the chat. But I'll go to this next page that has it filled out for me. So you can see I put my name, Evan, over here. I've been at my library for 5.5 years. My alignment is hardware and software since I'm on the techie side. And for my starting skills, I put troubleshooting, documentation, project management, and student supervision.
And while folks are doing that, we did have a question slash suggestion earlier and said, have you considered adding bonds section where they could list people they've encountered in their employment, contact info, etc.
That's a really interesting idea, and I like that a lot. Like, kind of builds like a maybe reference sheet of some sort, or kind of that informal networking that they might do. Somebody in the chat, as he says, cataloger, so chaotic neutral. I love that response. So I'll give about, maybe another minute and a half. And while that happens, I'm going to do a little bit of talking to fill the dead space. So when I do this with my student employees, I usually sit down with them one-on-one and help them fill this out, because the hardest part on the sheet is the starting skills, because it makes you have that reflective part of yourself that not everybody's good with. So I often have that conversation with them on figuring out what they're good at and put in the starting skills area. So I start my conversation with them as like, what were you good at your last job, if they've had a previous job, or what were you good at in school? What were some of your favorite classes? And they can either put like hard skills, so like troubleshooting, documentation, stuff like that. But they can also put soft skills, and I really encourage that for my students. So I, say, oh, if you're really good with communications, put communications. If you're a problem solver, put problem solver. And then once we do our end of the semester, end of the year reviews, we can go back to these starting skills, and I can say, oh, I don't know if this was really a good skill to list. I think there's some more improvement that need to be, go on before it can be put on starting skills. Or the reverse can happen where I'm like, you're really good at this one thing, and I think you should have put this on here because you're a great communicator. You're a real dedicated problem solver. So there's that bit of conversation that happens. Right, another couple seconds as people fill this out, and then we'll jump into the gameplay. For the gameplay, I will need some people to volunteer, and we'll use that raise hand feature, which apparently I have raised. Lower hand. Oh, I love all the nerdy stuff that's happening in chat right now. Teen Services Librarian, Blood Hunter. Programming equals Warlock. Customer service equals fighter. That definitely, fighter is definitely something that might be happening during the pandemic. Love all these responses. All right. So hopefully everybody has their character sheet filled out. If not, no worries. It's low stakes right now. All right, and we're gonna move over to the prompt. So the prompt is, you're all new hires in the Alexandria Library. So we had a really great year. We had tons of state funding. Isn't that nice? And we're able to hire all 99 of you. Wow. And today is your first day on the job. But the Alexandria Library isn't the best place to work, because even though it's your first day on the job, they're short-staffed and they put you on the front desk. So even though everybody's going to take even though multiple people are going to be playing and taking turns doing actions, I'm using the collective you in this sense. So you, all 99 of you, are sitting at this desk, but as a singular entity. So I need our first volunteer. So I need somebody to raise their hands. And hopefully you have a mic to play along. That'd be really helpful. And then you'll take an action, and then we'll move on to the next person. And George, can you let me know if we have anybody raising their hands?
Oops, I was muted. Yes, I did have a hand raised, and I think I allowed them to talk. Maria? You should be able to speak now. And if not, I had another hand. Oh, hand went down.
Oh.
Okay. So Maria, can you?
Oh, hi. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I guess, is there a particular anything that we want to try and do with this?
Yep. So now that you're at the front desk, you're sitting there on your first day, you're clicking away at the computer, and you see somebody out of your peripheral approach the desk. What would you like to do?
Well, I would probably greet them and say, "Hello, welcome to the Alexandria Library. How can I help you?"
Oh, I was actually trying to print and it's not working. Could you help with that?
Oh, sure. The the paper hexes have been jamming lately, so uh, now, is there anyone else that's in the facility? Because I don't want to abandon my post if, you know.
No, most definitely. You don't want to leave that desk unattended.
Yes.
So you scan around and you look around the area. You see patrons working out in the general area. And through a glass window on your left-hand side, you see the back office area and you see your supervisor sitting at their computer.
Hmm. I suppose I would say um, something to the effect of, all right, sure, I'll be right over with you. Let me just quick grab someone else to watch the desk while I go and help you, or something to that effect.
Okay. So you're going to go over to your supervisor?
Yeah.
Okay. You walk over and you approach your supervisor, and you can see that they have their phone pressed against their shoulder and their ear as they type away on their keyboard. You start to turn away because you don't want to interrupt them, and they cover the receiver of the phone and they wave you over and whisper, "What do you want?"
Oh, I was just looking if there is anyone available to cover the desk while I help patron.
"Oh, I'm on the phone right now, but I can see through this window, so it's fine if you need to go away for like a second. That's okay."
All right, thanks. But then,
All right. So you got that really unhelpful response from your supervisor. They're still going to stay in that back office area, but they're aware that you're leaving the desk for a moment. With that, I think I appreciate your time. So thank you so much. It's a virtual round of applause for being our first volunteer. And I want our next
Yay.
volunteer to take a stab at this.
Sure.
So show of hands, who wants to go next? You can find that raise hand feature if you exit full screen and you look in the bottom toolbar, raise hands.
I think we've got one. I think I unmuted them, or at least gave them the ability to unmute.
Hello.
Perfect.
Hi there. Welcome to the library. So I'll summarize where we're at currently. Somebody came up to the front desk having issues with printing. You went and told your supervisor you needed to go help somebody, so they're going to watch the front desk from in the circ area, and you are now free to do what you want.
I approached the patron at presumably their computer that they're trying to print from, or are they printing from their phone, or are they printing from something else?
Ooh, yeah, what kind of library are we? I'll make it a bit easier. They're printing from one of our library computers. You don't have to worry about messing with the patron's phone. So you scan the area and you see the patron sitting off a few computers away from the printers, looking confused at the screen.
I approached the patron to help them.
The patron looks up, greets you, and says, "Oh, thank you so much for being here to help me with this. I don't know what's going on. Just, computers are not my forte."
Not a problem. That's what I'm here for. And I take a look at what he's trying to print.
All right. So you see a Word doc pulled up. It's a resume that they're trying to print for, you assume, a job that they're applying for.
Okay. I locate the print button and set it to print.
All right.
Or I right click on the document.
On the Word document, you go up to the top left corner, File, Print. It gives you that little preview area. All looks wonderful. You click Print. A little box pops up.
Okay.
Do you
What
want to know
does
what
the
that
box
says?
say? Yes.
The box says, enter in a print job name. So do you want to put something in that box?
I invite them to put something in the box. They can name it what they feel it should be named.
All right.
It is not my job to name things for other people.
So the patron takes the keyboard and mouse, clicks into that box, and types Alexi resume, and then
Okay.
presses the print button again, and it shoots off into the space.
Where is the printer in proximity to the computer?
Yeah, so the printer is just a few computers away. So I would say about 10 feet away, there is the print station.
Do I hear the printer kicking on?
You don't hear the printer kicking on.
I ask the patron if I can put my hands on the keyboard. I don't like to lean over people.
No, most definitely. So the patron scoots out of the way so you can have a seat at the computer.
Okay, I check the status of the print job on the computer.
It looks like everything's good. There's no little pop-ups, there's no errors, there's nothing that seems out of the ordinary on the computer.
Okay, I tell him to wait one moment. I approach the printer and I do a repair check on the printer.
You head over to the printer and you immediately something stands out in this new library. Since this isn't exactly like the old library you used to work in, you have to take it in for a minute and you scan the area first. And you see that there is a computer with a little print screen on it, a mouse, and then two printers side by side.
Okay,
Do you want to investigate that computer screen?
yes.
All right. You go over to that computer screen and it says release jobs question mark.
I
Scan
click
your
yes.
scan your patron card.
I type in my own library card number, which I have memorized.
Oh, look at first day on the job and you already have it memorized. Good for
I'm good
you.
with numbers.
All right. You log in and you see a series of print jobs listed in the queue, and one of them is Alexi resume.
I give that one priority.
All right. You click that one. You have the option for print is no longer grayed out, and you click print. You hear the printer whirling and it suddenly stops. All right. And I think
yeah.
I think with that, I'll let you off the hook so you don't have to start digging around in a printer. And thank you so much for your time. And we're going to look for another volunteer right now to take over.
Okay, I had one more, so I've gone ahead and
Okay. Okay, so I take out my printing sword of magnificent and wave it over that printer, and all the red lights disappear and the paper is ejected victoriously.
Unfortunately, in this environment, the printer can smell fear and it does not fall susceptible to your magic attack.
Then I use the spell of turn off and turn back on.
All right. How do you want to do that? Do you want to press the power button or do you just want to pull the plug on it?
Oh no, always use the power button.
Okay. You look around on the printer and you find a small power button located on the right side of it. You press and hold it until the light slowly drains out of it and you let go. It's off right now, so you press it again and it hums back up in all its loud mechanical printing glory, and then it stops there again.
Then I'm okay. So then I'm looking around for the procedure manual that tells me what I need to do when I have a printer issue.
All right, that's a really good thought. So where do you think that would be located in this library?
Back at my desk, back
Okay.
at the service desk.
All right, you walk about the 20 feet over to the circulation desk and you start scanning the area for something that looks like a manual. You scan and scan, and finally your eye catches a bright red colored book titled Circulation Desk Manual, and it has 10 sections. You can see the brightly colored tabs on the right-hand side of the book. Emergency procedures, phone use, library directory, Wi-Fi, scanning, printing, recipes, databases, troubleshooting, and index.
Well, I'm immediately by the shiny, sparkly recipes tab, but I must hold back that urge, and I will go to the not so attractive printing tab.
All right. You grasp that printing tab and you flip it all the way over, and this is what you're met with on that screen. So printing is the title of it. Patrons can print from computers for 10 cents for black and white or 20 cents for color. They can send the print job, but they must go to the print station, select the print job, and pay the correct amount at the machine. After the payment has been released, their job should print automatically from the desired printer.
Aha. So then I journey back to the original requester who's having problems printing
Mhm.
and ask them either for their ID, which hopefully has money on it to print, if that's one of those types of things, or I have, before I left the desk, I reached into the middle drawer and got the override key.
The magical drawer of holding that has the override key.
Yes, that's it. I know I didn't have a bag of holding, but yes, my override key, and say I didn't realize that you had to pay.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Print it for free that time.
Okay, so you head over to the print station where the patron's waiting around. Luckily, they're very calm, cool, and collected, which we wish all
Yes.
patrons were like.
Yes.
And you tell them this information that they need to pay for the print job, and you ask if they have money on their card. Oh, I think I have some money on there, and they hand you their card.
Okay. Then I insert it in the magical receptor device that is standing right by the printer. And hopefully there's a prompt now on the screen next to the computer, or actually not computer, screen on the printer that allows me to say, yes, print this, or deduct the appropriate amount from the magical card.
All right, so you swipe the patron's card, the screen opens up and you see the print job list again. You look in the list, and luckily there's an Alexi resume on there twice, so the patron has printed this before. You click that, you click print, and it whirls again. And this time it gets stuck, unfortunately.
Oh no.
I know.
I know. Do I have someone that I can visually see that I can ask for assistance, or should I pay attention to the screen on the printer copier that will tell me where it's jammed at?
Those are all good questions that I think our next adventurer should take a stab at. So thank you so much. Excellent work finding that manual.
Okay.
All right. Who is our next volunteer to go? We'll probably have maybe 1 or 2 people left, depending on how well things go. You've made great progress so far. So we just need another person to volunteer.
Well, we've got one, but it's someone who's already gone. So I'm going to, oh, here we go. There's another person. I'm going to go to them next. Okay, you should be able to talk, Jamie.
Thank you. So I'm going to look at the screen on the printer to see if it gives instructions for which area of the printer is jammed.
Okay. You look at the printer LCD screen. It's so dim, it's barely visible, but you see a number of tray, jam, open, compartment 2.
Okay, so I look for compartment 2 and kind of look for an opening to get into the area within it.
Okay. You locate tray 2, you open it, and you hear the crunching and crinkling of paper as you open it. You reach inside and you pull out your prize, a half-fed piece of paper that seems to have been the culprit. You close the tray, and the printer starts whirling again, and out comes the print job. The patron immediately looks relieved that their print job has finally been released, and you hand it to them, and they are off on their merry way.
Awesome.
So This would be like the part where there's like fireworks and like the Legend of Zelda, like do 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 do. And you hold it up in the air as it floats. Yeah, stuff like that. So congratulations. All of you were able to solve our printing dilemma. So thank you so much, everybody who participated. That was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it as well. We'll skip past this. And now you get to update your character sheets. So in that left-hand side in your skills tree, you're gonna look for the general area and add a +1 to troubleshooting. And you're gonna go down to communication, add a +1 there for in-person, since you had to work with that patron and you had to fix a printer. And as a bonus, as your reward, you get this lovely cat gif of a cat taking a little print job. Also in this part, if we were doing this IRL, I would also be giving you a little sticker to put in that badges area, usually with a fun icon of a old style printer that says, you know, encounter number 1. And as everybody scribbles in their information or types it into the PDF, we're going to give you a sneak peek of what it looks like on the back side for the Dungeon Master. And basically what I'm looking at is a sheet like this that talks about my encounter. So this one was just called Newbie. It's encounter 1 because it's the first one in the series. There's this pre-knowledge area. What do they need to know before starting? And they don't need to know anything, since in this kind of controlled environments, this is, you know, their first day on the job. So we don't expect them to know anything. And talk about what they will earn if they successfully complete it, and what the learning outcomes are for completing this encounter. So at the end of this encounter, players will understand how to help patrons with public printers and become familiar with the manual at the circulation desk. Check and check. There are also a few things they could learn that are like not listed here, but benefits as playing part of this, depending on where the kind of role playing goes. So this is kind of the prompt area in the bold, and then this is my area down here that talks about some of the things that can happen. So they can ask where the manual is or if their supervisor is available, but not everything's listed. It's a very short 1-pager that kind of just gives me background on what possibly could be happening or questions that might come up. All right. And with that, we've got plenty of time for questions answered. So let's move on to that.
All right, so the only one that I still have, and go ahead and start typing in the chat if you've got others, a compliment on the nature of the role play, but they were hoping we could dive into a little bit more on the procedurality, which you just started to do. But if you want to go into that anymore, and then talk a little bit about the training context, including the size of the group you do this with, frequency, session length, and other hurdles that you may have experienced using this.
Yeah, so let me go back to some previous slides. And we'll talk about what it's like for playing this. So for my team, it is about 4 student employees that I play with. And we play for about once a month. We'll do a Dungeons and Dragons encounter. Not so much with the pandemic, but before that, it was about once a month that we would play one of these encounters. And the encounters, I guess, were more based on things that I wanted them to make sure that they got out of their time here as a student employee. So focused on a lot of soft skills. That's why it's based around communication. When George was able to play this at the Library Collective last year, I did it where we made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches as part of a documentation exercise. And it was a lot of fun. It was shocking to a lot of librarians, as they would give me instructions on how to make a library peanut butter and jelly sandwich, not a library sandwich, but a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I would take their directions very literally. And that kind of encounter is based on giving them an ideal of not taking things for granted, especially when communicating technical topics in my term. So they would have to use very simple instructions as they wrote documentation for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that anybody with their knowledge level could follow. And for my team, when we play this together, it's very similar to the way it went today, but there's a bit more of hesitation and collaboration going on. So in that peanut butter and jelly example I was talking about, when we played that with my team, that was something that really affected one of the members, where she was like taken aback by like how literal the directions were taken, and she was scared to give the next direction. But as part of these encounters being a safe place for mistakes or learning, we kind of paused and we're like, all right, let's sum up where we're at. You can say whatever you want, but we won't do that action right now until you're very sure about it. And that kind of helped her, get comfortable in saying something without, it being taken really literally and ripping a bag of bread in half. So that's one of the nice parts about playing it this way. And then for the character sheets, back over here, I guess I want the other one, this one. These are updated, as things occur. So either when we do encounters or when they complete a task in our project management system, they update their stats here. And then on the page that's not listed here, but it's on that PDF download, there's that last page, that's the reflection. And we save that for the end of the academic year, and they write a reflection based on what they've learned, things they want to do differently for next year. Because often my employees will be here for the fall, spring, and then their summer, they go back home and they come back in the fall. So that reflection area is a nice area for me to do their review and to leave themselves some notes of what they want to do when they come back in the fall. Hopefully that answers that question for that person.
Yeah. And so some of these might have been built in or in there. So I'll read them out. And if the person who asked it wants more follow-up, you can let me know. How have students taken to the training? How do they like it? How do you adapt for ongoing training? What was required to convince the administration? And with that, I guess the skeptics, they were probably meaning the students, but you could also, if they're skeptics in the admin, how do you sort of convince them? Were they all hired as a cohort, or do you sort of have a way to sort of roll this with different experience levels? And ways you could maybe adapt this to non-student workers?
All really good questions. So I'll start with that very base one of how did I get buy-in from my administration? And I have to say I'm very lucky to have a mixture of a really supportive, work environment here at my university, where I'm allowed to kind of try weird things like Dungeons and Dragons. And I've also been here long enough that I have enough social capital where I can, be trusted to do these different kind of things and see how they work out. So that's kind of how that happens. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I don't have any pain points when it came to starting it and getting buy-in from, my institution. For the students though, I do want to go back to this point that we talked about changes. And doing that actual D&D campaign really helps solidify the ideal for students, because it's often hard to understand the flow and the feeling of Dungeons and Dragons for those who haven't played before until they actually play a real one. So once they did that real fantasy Dungeons and Dragons campaign with one of our librarians, it finally clicked for them of how they're supposed to support each other, how the DM supports them, what kind of things they can do, and what things they're encouraged to try. So that's how it worked for the students. Addressing the question about changing up as my student team changes is a really great question, and that's often accomplished by changing the scenarios enough that it's new for people and they can learn different skills. So it's very modular, that instead of, for example, this printing campaign, I could change the learning outcomes to be a bit different, that they actually need to reach out to a different department or something else, like our IT department in our library, to get help with this. So you can change the learning outcomes, you can change the scenarios a bit, snuff it's different. But my favorite way to mix things up is to allow an employee that's already went through this once lead that session. So for the peanut butter and jelly documentation one, I actually had one of my student leads lead that one for the team. And it was really beneficial for them to have him do that, because you got that experience leading a team in this kind of interesting way and being that person that gets to do it. And they got to experience it for the first time, and he didn't have to go through it again because he would have known how to do it properly. So yeah, my team often changes from year to year as students graduate. So yeah, that's how I kind of fix that issue.
Sure.
And I think there was another question in those questions.
Ways to adapt to a non-student audience.
Yep, ways to adapt for non-student audience.
And while you kind of think about that, think about that, and I'll read one more that you can start thinking about. Have you incorporated die rolling beyond initiative? But to the non-student audience, one thing to keep in mind that I sort of got as a takeaway is that if we remember that most role-playing games are collective storytelling, that's really what training and evaluation is. So if you're a supervisor, and especially if you're a gamer, but you sort of haven't thought of it that way, you can customize the character sheet and sort of use it as a way for your employees to document their growth and change. That's kind of one way I saw when I saw Evan's original presentation. You know, they can sort of keep track of things. And I think someone asked about, is it more one-off or like really ongoing? I would definitely see it as ongoing. And I think you actually talked about this. And I'll say one more thing and then I'll let you jump back in, is that, you know, obviously if it is a fixed amount of time, like a student worker, for example, when they graduate, they've got this great document that can be used to communicate transferable skills, which I thought was really cool. So if you want to clarify what I said or talk about the dice, that'd be great.
I think you nailed it. So I'll go back to that first one of adjusting it for staff. And I think the focus of these kind of campaigns is it can be made really general for anybody that needs certain training, or, you know, whether it's brand new training for them or it's reinforcement of ideas they've previously learned. So for that printing one, that can just be a really great one to do with your extra help or new hires, or even ones as just a refresher to make sure that they are doing the proper procedure. You can throw in different like, you know, catches in the thing. So perhaps instead of them trying to go straight to their supervisor, the supervisor isn't available. So instead of that being their first go-to, now they have to think of something else and get them thinking on their feet of problem solving. So that's one way I would suggest kind of adjusting it for staff, is making it fit your situation in these encounters. So, you know, with my students, I can throw anything at them, but if you're working in the circulation department, you want to make this more focused on circulation, you can, you know, make an encounter that's based on your lost book, you know, workflow or shelf reading, whatever you want to do there. For die roll, I haven't incorporated beyond just that first one starts, because I don't want the mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons to overshadow the learning outcomes. So I don't want them focused too much on that nitty gritty of it, of rolling dice every time they need to do something to see if it's successful or not, because I'm more focused on them learning, you know, the things I want them to learn during their encounters. And George, you did touch on that a bit, of this character sheet being a great way to have something tangible that they can have at the end of the semester, the year, of things they've accomplished. So the goals that they've achieved. And they can see this as they start writing resumes for future jobs. They have all these skills that they've learned and they can write these in tangible ways. But you definitely don't have to use this character sheets. You can make yours in Word, you can hand draw it. This is just what I chose to use, but you can adapt this to be however it works best for your team, would be my advice for that person.
So far, the only one we haven't talked about yet is someone asking about quantifiable data for success of using D&D as a training, and it just scrolled off the screen, training method for long term. How do you prove D&D is an effective training method? So if you want
That's a really good question. I don't have quantifiable data. I did survey my students when we started doing this based on what they thought of it, and it was an anonymous survey, so they could feel free to give as harsh a feedback as they wanted. And the feedback was really good. They did point out certain things, like they did point out that the D&D was often too much in the early days, of like it was too focused on D&D instead of the core skills that they're supposed to be learning. That made them confused. So that's how I've changed it since then. But the way I know it works is that once they are in these environments where they have to use some of these skills they've learned, particularly the documentation one, for example, I can see that the documentation is better from when we played it in D&D based when they actually have to make real documentation that we're going to be using. So that's my way of judging if this is a success or not, is are those skills that they learned sticking with them and being useful as they actually need to apply those in their real life.
Another question just came in. How do we use the subcategories under the skills?
Yeah, so let me zoom in on this. And I uploaded, not that one. I uploaded an Adobe Illustrator version of this, so you can customize these to be more relevant for all of you, because I don't think this would be relevant for most people in this session, the hardware and software. But this is something I've gone back and forth about on what these main categories are and what the sub ones are. But it's really the main ones were things I definitely wanted them to walk away with based on my student employment program. So them being mostly IT people, I wanted them to have a focus in hardware and software and data. As a library, they're going to get library specific information here, but it kind of generally flows in together. And then I'd break out hardware and software into being HTML and CSS, Drupal and stuff like that. So picking out a list of skills that you want your employees to learn, grouping those up into subgroups, that is how you kind of build your tree out and figure out what you want to do. And this tree's changed. It's going to continue to change as the program changes and students come in with different skills, or they need different skills for the job market out there. All right.
Okay, had some great conversation about safety training and some other ways this could be used. So hopefully everyone's seen that. Safety tools.
And in the chat, I just posted a link to our materials for today. So you can click there, you can see the presentation, Adobe version, Adobe PDF version of the character sheet, an Illustrator version of the character sheet, and 2 encounters, the one that we played today with the printer and the documentation one that I talked about.
Looks like we got one last in here. Is the reflection section the performance review component of the technique, or is there more to it?
So the reflection is more of a their year reflection. So these character sheets get archived at the end of each year, basically. So they're reflecting on their year that they've had in the department. So for example, if they're a brand new employee, they're going to talk about what it was like onboarding, what kind of skills they learned, what they enjoyed about the job, what things they didn't enjoy. And it's really wide open of what the reflection can be, because I want to make sure that they have every opportunity to learn. So, and this is something that I'll review as well with them as we talk about, you know, what their year was like, to make sure they add certain things. So like, oh, you were really good with this one thing. And that's kind of what I talked about with the starting skills area. When we do that review, we'll look at the starting skills area again, and we'll discuss if maybe they thought they were good in one area, but they actually needed a bit more work, or they didn't include something that they're actually phenomenal at. So that's how the reflection area works. Any other questions?
I have not seen any others that we have not touched on. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in for anyone who, yeah, we've had several questions about recording, as I said at the beginning, and I've said in chat a few times. I will send the link for the recording out once that's available. I'll go ahead and include links for the character sheet and some of the other resources Evan has dropped in the chat as well. And I am going to drop in the chat now a link for anyone who needs an LEU certificate for today. You can go ahead and let us know by filling out this form. And I will send those certificates out as well. If there are any other questions, don't hesitate to send last things along, but we're definitely getting a lot of thank yous, great presentations. Oh yeah, go ahead and stop, please. I'm sorry.